Welcome to Halacha in a Year, where we get to learn all the most relevant halacha through the prism of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. You are listening to Rabbi Ya'akov Trump. This year is kindly sponsored by the Moshe Group and CA, in zechus of Rivka Biela bas נחמה Shiefra, and in honor of Rabbi Trump. Today our topic takes us to Siman 3, the third chapter in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and it is about getting dressed. As we're seeing, this the area of halacha covers not just the ritual things that happen in shul, not just the things that happen in holy places and holy times, but even things as simple and as pedestrian as getting dressed. Our topic takes us through four major concepts, and they are modesty, secular styles, how to put on clothes, and appropriate bearing. Let's take them one at a time. Modesty. First thing we need to look at is that it is befitting of a person to fear Hashem, to fear God, even in the way they get dressed and the way they walk. This is actually described in the Gemara in Makos. The Gemara tells us on Chav Daled Amud Aleph that Micha, the great prophet in the first kingdom of Israel, was essentially like whittled down or distilled Judaism into three basic concepts. And he says, what tell the human being what is good, what is that Hashem wants from you? He says there's three things to do. One is to do justice, one is to love kindness to others, and the third one is to walk modestly with your God. That's the third one we're going to focus on today, which is modesty in one's bearing. How does that look? What does that express itself as? Number one is, when getting dressed, even in private, a person should not fully expose themselves. A person should change under the covers in a robe and not walk around unclothed. This means to say, even in a space of darkness. And this is such a un-Western value today, certainly when one's by oneself, and unfortunately, even not. When people just expose themselves, they have mirrors everywhere, and they look at themselves, and they gaze at themselves, and they walk around, and they prance around, and that's not a Jewish approach. A Jewish approach is a person needs to be modest even when no one else is around and even when it's dark. This requires a little bit of training, but it's to put oneself in the perspective as to why this really matters, and that is the person is always in front of their Creator. And he says, that is whether one is at dark or light, one is supposed to act in a sense of humility and respect in front of one's Creator. This leads us to our second concept today, which is secular styles. The Torah tells us in Vayikra, Perek Chof, that do not walk in the ways of the nation that I am going to remove from the land of Canaan in front of you, Hashem tells the nation of Israel. And this has a number of applications. Why is this prohibited? The Kitzur explains that there are two basic reasons. Number one is because the clothing of the non-Jews are often related to arrogance and immodesty. We're trying to avoid that type of culture. But number two is, some of their clothing and styles are actually connected to their pagan practices, and we are trying to avoid any element of action or behavior which relates to paganism. Let's take a look at some examples. What are examples of clothing which are related to arrogance? The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch gives us the example of wearing purple garments, which are often worn by nobility. Those are the kind of things that one would walk around and say, oh, I like to be just like that as well. I would like to get up to that rung in society and wear their clothing. Remember, we're not talking about where there's synthetic materials. We're not talking about where it's easy dyeing and cheap clothing and the industry across the world. We're talking about where this would be a very expensive item. Another example he gives is wearing a weapon for show or style, where many of the pagan warriors or want-to-be warriors would walk around wearing a sword, wearing a shield, wearing a bow. That's not appropriate for a Jew. Just for the sake of show. What about examples of immodest clothing? So he gives a simple example. We're not talking about showy, exposing clothing. That should be obvious that that's prohibited. We're talking about even something which is not showy, it's not exposing the body. But let's say the example that's given in the Gemara is that Jews would wear black straps to hold their sandals on, but non-Jews would use red straps. He said that's inappropriate. That's drawing too much attention. It's not a modest color to be wearing those red straps. And what is an example of wearing clothing which have paganistic innuendos to them? So the Kitzur gives us an example is haircuts. You'll notice in general that the Jewish haircut is primarily for the men, is allowing there to be hair down the sides, and those are where we grow the side locks, the payos. Whereas the non-Jewish style, which is certainly a pagan style, is the mohawk, growing a lot of hair at the top and shaving the sides. Still today you see this, and although it's not necessarily done with paganistic intent, that is certainly where it came from. And today, the same haircuts are all the same. The sides short, the top looking like an overflowing bush. That is a non-Jewish a non-Jewish haircut, and it is also a expression ultimately of paganism in its original form. If one goes back in the historical annals, it's a sad thing when one walks into a Jewish store and sees a picture of the clothing, the models they're wearing, looking just like that, because that's simply not what a Jewish person is supposed to be looking like. When is there an item of clothing that one does not need to be concerned about? So the Kitzur points out, and this is based on the Ramah in Shulchan Aruch, that if there's a garment or style which is worn but for no apparent functional reason, one should be concerned and not wear that for that reason. But if there is a function to it, then one is allowed. For instance, a doctor's coat. A doctor wears a white coat, and that's to demonstrate their station, and that is allowed because there's a function. Many of the items of clothing that we wear today have functions, have reasons for them. This is actually one of the reasons why Hasidim have the practice not to wear a tie. A tie has no function, and perhaps it may be related to the way that priests used to wear their adornments as well. The Kitzur ends off the section by saying, "Umizeh yilmad kol ha'adam lefi makom ha'ivashat." Everybody should learn, based on their styles, based on their realities, what is really going on and how to apply this. Because again, what may have been true then may not be true now, but there may be many other examples of what is chukos ha'goy, of wearing the clothing of the nations around us as well. And one has to be thoughtful about this as well. Judaism is somewhat more conservative about its progress in styles. It's slower, it's more modest, it's not as fast as others, and one has to think about the way one dresses, one walks around the street, one's children and grandchildren walk around, and why are we wearing somebody else's name? Why are we wearing pictures of other people on our clothing? Why is that so important to us? Which leads us to the last thing that Kitzur points out, that is, what about the value of one's clothes? He points out that a Jew, should not wear items which are ridiculously expensive, because this leads to arrogance. But a person should not wear dirty or cheap clothing. A person should have good quality clothes that are clean, and should go to extensive efforts to ensure that one has shoes. This, unfortunately, is something which has been long lost in the Jewish world, because we're living in a Western society in which capitalism, which is unregulated for the most part, rules the way. So does style in such a way. And the more money that people make, the more they need to feel good about spending that money on more expensive and not just the things one can get off the rack. And therefore, there's entire industries of people who are selling things which are priced at such a way that the people who have a lot of money to spend will feel good about spending it there. And this is something which is not necessarily a Jewish concept. It is a market concept, but one has to always take a step backwards and wonder why one is doing this, why one is spending this money. And remembering that the important thing is to have good quality clothing that is clean. Those are the two requirements. Anything else might not be part of our, we'll call it, character pool or value system. Our third concept today is how to put clothes on. A few very interesting things over here. One is to be aware of the fact that the right side of the body is considered more important, and we see this from the way that the Mishkan was inaugurated, when the children of Aaron were dressed in their clothing, and when the inauguration ceremony put drops of blood from the korban and oil, it was on the right ear, the right thumb first as well. So we see the right side has precedence. And number two is we see that the tefillin being on the left hand of a man is more important when it comes to tying things. How does that express itself in Halacha? So when putting on shirts, coats, pants, socks, the right side goes first. When removing shirts, coats, pants, or socks, the left side goes off first to show more respect for the right. When tying straps or laces, the left gets tied first because of that tefillin relationship as well. What about left-handed men? In this case, when it comes to putting on shirts, coats, pants, or socks, the right side still goes first because that is an objective reality. But when tying, then the left-handed person will tie on the right side because their tefillin goes on their right. So everything will be on their right as for such a person. What about putting on multiple clothes at once? So one's in a rush, one pulls off one's undershirt and shirt and puts it on the chair, and the next morning one puts it back on. that should not be done because of kosher l'shichra. It is something which leads to forgetfulness. What does that mean? So on a Kabbalistic level, it may mean to say that a person spiritually is going to lose their Torah knowledge from such actions. There's a number of many cases listed in the Gemara. And later in the Gemara as well. But rationally as well, it could be these are ideas which distract a person and will, even for a few moments, distract a person from the ideas and concepts that they should be focusing on as well. Are there any other examples of this? Actually, in our same chapter in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, there's one other example, and that is a man should not walk between two women, and two women not walk between, and a woman not walk between two men. This is seen as immodest and distracting as well. And finally, last part of our halacha today, and that is our fourth concept, is appropriate bearing. How should a person walk? And this is based, the pasuk in Yeshayahu describes that he says, Yan ki gavu b'nois tzion v'taylachna nutuyos goren u'mashre koisenayim. Since the daughters of Zion walked with their heads thrown back and roving eyes, to a tofaf halach v'tofaf teilachna b'raglaim te'aksana, that therefore with mincing gait and tinkling with their feet, because they were wearing these bracelets on their feet. Therefore Hashem says v'sipacha Hashem kod b'nois Tzion Hashem pos han ya'ara, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bear the plates of these daughters of Zion, will uncover their heads. So they acted in such arrogant fashions, they will ultimately be made to pay. That's what Hashem says. The example of arrogance is walking with one's head flung back, and therefore, says the Kitzur, this is important in posture, not to walk with one's back straight up and one's head back and one's chin up. One is also not supposed to walk bent over with a terrible posture, shoulders rounded, facing the floor. Rather, one walks in a normal way, in the middle, with their head slightly down, not looking like one owns the world, and looking down one's nose at everyone else as well. And how does this reflected? Is because a person is supposed to look, in a sense, humble. A person is supposed to look modest. One's not supposed to stand out. One's not the center of creation. One other aspect of this that's related to this is the idea of head covering, which the Kitzur talks about, and that is a man may not walk 4 amos, not to walk even 7 feet without a head covering on their head, or that they may not say any prayer or any bracha with an uncovered head as well. And this is the notion of what we call today a yamalka, a kippah. And this, the Gemara tells us that one of the mothers of the great sages in the Gemara would say that he got to his station because kasei reishech, she would say, you've got to cover your head, ki keichi tehavi alach eimsa deshmaya, in order that you should have the fear of heaven upon you. And that's something we all wish for, and this is the expression of it in practice. Have a wonderful and meaningful day.